Halloween tragedy in Seoul. Desperate families wait for news of missing loved ones. At least 154 people died, many of them teenagers, as crowds became trapped in narrow streets.
I feel grateful, but I also feel terribly guilty that I was able to make it out alive.
Also on the programme, the Home Secretary under pressure. Now Suella Braverman is facing scrutiny over her handling of asylum seekers. An immigration centre in Dover is attacked with petrol bombs.
Please know that addiction is not a choice. No one chooses to become an addict.
The Princess of Wales appeals for more understanding of addiction.
This is ITV News with Romilly Weeks.
Good evening. Distraught relatives in South Korea have been trying to trace family members missing after Halloween celebrations that ended in a deadly crush. At least 154 people were killed, many of them young adults and teenagers, with more seriously injured in hospital. South Korea's president visited the scene today and declared a period of national mourning. It appears that partygoers funneled into a narrow alley and then became trapped by the weight of huge crowds. Devastating eyewitness accounts from those caught up in the tragedy are starting to emerge, as our China correspondent Debbie Edwards reports.
This is the sound of a mother's heart breaking as she is told her child has died. These parents were among the dozens of hopeful relatives who had waited all night for news, to then be told the worst. Tens of thousands of mostly young people had gone out to celebrate Halloween and the first big party in Itaewon since COVID restrictions were lifted. By 10 o'clock on Saturday night, its narrow alleys were a sea of people. The terror on the faces of those being engulfed in the deadly swarm is hard to watch. When the crowd cleared, paramedics, police and anyone who could help joined the desperate battle to save lives. Costumes that had been joyfully planned were ripped apart so CPR could be given.
It was meant to be such a happy...
Rafael Rashid says he and his friends left early because it felt dangerously overcrowded.
Of course, I feel grateful, but I also feel terribly guilty that I was able to make it out alive. But unfortunately, some others, similar to me, might not have been able to make it out just because they were one street away.
The president of South Korea visited the scene to see for himself the aftermath of one of the country's greatest tragedies. He declared a week of national mourning for a street stampede that has claimed more than 150 lives. The evidence examined by police included the belongings of a youthful generation, happy to be partying together again.
As a president who is responsible for the lives and safety of the people, I feel heavy-hearted and it is difficult to control my sadness.
The investigation will focus on whether something triggered the crowd to surge, but so far it looks like it was a tragic combination of too many people in too small a space. One of Seoul's most famous nightlife districts was today a place to pray and mourn the dead. Debbie Edward, ITV News.
In Somalia, over 100 people have been killed and 300 more injured after 2 car bombs exploded in the capital Mogadishu on Saturday. The Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab extremist group claimed responsibility, saying they targeted the education ministry, which they claim is removing Somali children from the Islamic faith. At least 68 people have died after a bridge collapsed in India's western state of Gujarat. Authorities say as many as 150 were on the crossing in Morbi town. Rescue efforts are still underway. And in the US, Nancy Pelosi says she's heartbroken and traumatized following a violent attack on her husband at their home in San Francisco. 82-year-old Paul Pelosi is recovering in hospital after being struck repeatedly with a hammer. A 42-year-old man has since been arrested. Newly reappointed Home Secretary Suella Braverman is facing fresh scrutiny, this time over allegations that she ignored legal advice about keeping asylum seekers in processing centres for too long. And Labour are pushing for an inquiry into the security breach which led to her sacking by former Prime Minister Liz Truss. Today, the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove insisted she is still the right person to be Home Secretary, as Harry Horton reports.
It's less than 6 days since Suella Braverman started her second stint as Home Secretary. So far, it's hardly been a smooth return. This week, inspectors told MPs this migrant processing centre in Manston, Kent, was so overcrowded it was unsafe. Today, the Home Secretary was accused of ignoring legal advice about detaining migrants here for unlawfully long periods, something the government denies.
The situation in Manston is not one that any of us are happy with, but Suella has been working incredibly hard in order to ensure that we can deal effectively with the facts on the ground, and she's deployed an Army General, Stuart Skeets, in order to make sure that the situation in Manston can be improved.
Suella Braverman's first stint as Home Secretary ended less than 2 weeks ago, following a security breach. Opposition parties say she should never have been allowed back into government.
All of this shows why Rishi Sunak was so irresponsible to reappoint her just 6 days after she had broken the ministerial code. This is not in the interests of the country. We've still got the Conservative Party putting their own politics before the national interest.
One former Tory Chancellor says the Home Secretary may soon be forced out.
Well, I think they probably make a calculation down the street that she's going to blow up, and that's fine by them because, you know, she's no fan of theirs and they're no fan of hers.
For now, Suella Braverman remains in post, with an ever-growing list of challenges on her desk.
And Harry joins me now. The big question, Harry, can Suella Braverman survive?
Well, she's certainly under pressure at the moment, and she's got this ever-growing in-tray at the Home Office. And you saw in my report some of the issues at the immigration centre in Manston, Kent there. It's overcrowded. There are reports of outbreaks of disease among the many hundreds of residents there. Interestingly, today, the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, was visiting that centre, not the Home Secretary. I think in the coming week, MPs will want to see Suella Braverman get on top of some of these issues, and they'll be looking to see if there are any further questions about her judgment. And also, interestingly, George Osborne there saying that Downing Street are no fans of Suella Braverman. He is quite close to this current Downing Street administration. So she is still in post tonight, Suella Braverman, but I think it's fair to say she's on shaky ground at the moment.
Interesting, Harry. Thank you. An attack was launched at an immigration centre in Dover earlier today. Petrol bombs were thrown by a man who then took his own life. Callum Watkinson is there for us. Callum, what more do we know about this?
Well, this facility is another location in Kent used by Border Force to process migrants when they arrive here in Dover. Kent police told us they got a call about this just after 11 o'clock this morning. A man had driven up to the gates behind me in a white car and thrown 2 or 3 incendiary devices from the window. He's caused some moderate damage to the fence here. He caused a minor injury. He then drove off to a petrol station less than half a mile from here, where it's been widely reported that he took his own life whilst sitting in that car. Now, we haven't had any official confirmation that his actions were in any way provoked by the function of this building. What we do know, though, is that yesterday saw one of the highest daily totals of migrants arriving here for many weeks. 990 people arrived here in Dover. Now, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, you heard from Harry there, under pressure over the immigration issue. She's tweeted about this in the last hour. All she's said, though, is that her thoughts are with those affected and the tireless Home Office staff and the police who are working here in Dover.
Callum, in Dover, thank you for that. Voters are going to the polls in Brazil. Their choice between the current far-right leader Jair Bolsonaro and another former president, the left-wing Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. The campaign has been bitterly fought and widened divisions in the country. The result could have profound implications for the Amazon rainforest and global warming, as Emma Murphy reports from Sao Paulo.
His vote was for himself for a further 4 years as president, for a right-wing conservative Christian Brazil. Yet this is a ballot President Jair Bolsonaro has consistently questioned, seeking to undermine its validity the more dire his position in the polls has become. Insisting he will win, he told those at the polling station that if God wants, victory will be his. This is the man seeking to deny that victory and retake the highest office in the land, former President Lula da Silva. His vote is for a left-wing Brazil, a Brazil which would once again give voice to all in society and reintroduce protection for the Amazon and its people. The polls suggest this angry, polarised campaign will end in success for Lula. If so, it would be a spectacular comeback for a man jailed, then cleared of corruption in office.
In the hours ahead, Lula da Silva hopes he will be president-elect of this country. But even his supporters fear the violence his victory could unleash.
Bolsonaro has governed with a populist Trump-style presidency, giving rise to fears that should he be defeated, he won't leave power without a fight.
I don't think he's ready to lose.
Guilherme Casarões is a political analyst who's followed this campaign.
I fear violence in the streets in the short run, because Bolsonaro has very successfully created this narrative that elections are fraudulent. And of course, even if he doesn't mean it, he's got 50 million voters who tend to believe in him or poised to believe in whatever he says.
Voting is mandatory in Brazil and 120 million ballots are expected to be cast as this country chooses between two very different visions for its future. Emma Murphy, ITV News, Sao Paulo.
The Princess of Wales is calling on the public to show more compassion towards addicts. Appearing in a video message for the charity Action on Addiction, Kate has used her profile to reach out to those struggling. Geraint Vincent explains.
We as a society need to recognise that the only way to help those suffering is to try and understand what has led them to addiction, to empathise with them and to be compassionate to their struggles.
The Princess of Wales says she has now met many people who've suffered from the effects of addiction, and it's clear to her addiction is a mental health condition and not a choice.
My drinking took me to being completely isolated in my home, unable to hold a conversation, look at people in the eye. I was just a very broken, lost, vulnerable young woman.
Melissa Rice was a primary school teacher who spent years struggling with an addiction to alcohol. She told me if it hadn't been for the shame she felt about her drinking, she wouldn't have suffered for so long.
If we can talk more openly and honestly and people don't feel frightened to say, I think I've got a problem with drink, people then won't need to go to those depths where I got to. If only people could feel a bit more safe and secure to come out, access some help, say I've got a problem, then we can nip it in the bud.
Please do not let shame hold you back from getting the help you so desperately need.
The release of the Princess's video message marks the start of Addiction Awareness Week, treating alcoholism and drug addiction as a mental illness, rather than simply the result of a series of bad decisions, is an approach the charities are convinced will save lives.
They are here for you, so please ask for help. I know this was not a choice. Recovery is possible.
Geraint Vincent, ITV News.
To sport now, and Arsenal have gone back to the top of the Premier League, beating Nottingham Forest 5-0. And Manchester United had a 1-0 win over West Ham, moving them up to 5th place. And the England women's rugby team are through to the World Cup semi-finals in New Zealand. They'll now face Canada on Saturday. And congratulations to them. That is it for now. I'm back with the late news at 10 o'clock. Until then, good evening.
Week.